Hi guys, and welcome to another video. Today we're going to talk about the up and coming Astra Militarum codex. It's due for pre-ordering this weekend, so as this video goes out tomorrow it'll be the day of the pre-ordering. A week later the codex will drop. So on Warhammer Community all week they've been dropping bits and pieces day by day on some of the regiments that will appear in the book. So I thought we'll take a quick look through that, and then I'll explain at the end of the video the sort of schedule for the upcoming weeks with what we plan to do with the channel, and keep you guys informed with that. So we'll jump straight in. The first day was the Catachan. So at the top of the page there's a new Astra Militarum Codex on the way, and with it distinct rules for 8 regiments. So we all know the Cadians, the Mordians, Valhalland, and you know that sort of bits and pieces. But 8 regiments. So there'll be a few new ones in there, I would imagine. So it then says there'll be new chapter tactics, legion traits, and etc. for each regiment. Each regimental doctrine is designed to reflect the varied ways the Astra Militarum fight, have been specifically designed to reward a variety of different army builds. I think what Games Workshop are very keen to do at the minute is to get people away from building almost super lists. So I think we can look at different armies currently, and we all know, I would imagine, of one build for each of these armies that's particularly strong at the moment. I think with the codexes, GW is trying to give people a bit more of a variety of ways that they could go. So there isn't just one distinct key best thing. There's different things that people can try and do to sort of have fun while still being competitive. Because, I mean, you know, we all play to enjoy ourselves, but we all have that little bit of competitive edge when we're playing, which I don't think is a bad thing. So Catachan have a 2-part regimental doctrine designed to reflect the impressive strength of the jungle fighters. So brutal strength. So for infantry, units with this doctrine add 1 to their strength characteristic. In addition, they can add 1 to their leadership characteristic if they are within 6 inches of a friendly Catachan officer. Not terrible. I mean, they'd certainly be better in combat against, it even mentions here, fire warriors, for instance, Kroot, maybe. So you're talking the lower end of the spectrum, Pathfinders, etc. So that's not awful. Leadership, always a good thing, especially with guard. Each time a vehicle with this doctrine fires a ranged weapon that makes a random number of attacks, e.g. heavy D6, heavy 2 D6, for instance the battle cannon on a Lehman Russ tank, you can re-roll 1 of the dice used to determine the number of attacks made. So that's quite handy. So for instance, you've got D6 shots with your battle cannon, you roll a 2, you can re-roll that. Perhaps getting 5, 6 shots. Great. So that's a handy little boon to have. Absolutely. What does it say? Best units, Death Strike Missile. There are all sorts of uses for brutal strength, and nearly all of them are more sensible than using the Death Strike, but none are quite so fun or quite so catchy. After all, what is the Death Strike missile but the tank-based equivalent of an enormous bicep, with each hit causing a mortal wound? Every single shot counts. Brutal strength makes sure the Death Strike missile lives up to its name. Not a lot to say there. And then underneath, stratagem, Vortex missile. So this is what keys into them calling it the best unit. So for 3 command points, use this stratagem before you fire a Death Strike missile. You can re-roll failed hit rolls for this shot. In addition, add 1 to the roll made to determine whether other units within 6 inches are hit. If a model is wounded but not slain by the attack, roll another dice. On a 6, the model suffers a further D6 mortal wounds. That's not bad. So for instance, imagine that you've managed to fire it at a character. You've wounded it, but you've not killed it. So then you get to roll another dice and do a further D6 mortal wounds. That's pretty sweet, to be honest. 3 command points is quite a lot, but remember you're playing with guard. So most of the time you're able to take the big sort of detachments that grant a lot of CP. So that's not an awful thing. What else have we got? Vicious traps. Use this stratagem when an enemy unit finishes a charge move within 1 inch of a Catachan unit from your army that is wholly on or within a terrain feature. Roll a dice. On a 4+, that enemy unit suffers D3 mortal wounds. Situational, of course, as most of the stratagems are. Let's be honest. There's a few that stand out, I think, in the army books that have come out so far, but a lot of them are situational. That I would say is one of them. But 1 CP, not too bothered, not too bad at all, really. So whether you're looking to create a particularly devastating armoured column or just really like flamers, there's a lot to love about the Catachans. And then it just goes on to say that tomorrow's Mordian. So we've got Mordian here. So what do they get? Regimental Doctrine. If the base of every model in an infantry unit with this doctrine is touching the base of at least one other model from the same unit, the unit has +1 leadership and can add 1 to hit rolls made for models in that unit when firing Overwatch. You can add 1 to hit rolls made for vehicles with this doctrine when firing Overwatch if they are within 3 inches of 1 or more other friendly Mordian vehicles. So it says the parade drill regimental doctrine adds some much needed insurance to your units against getting charged, rewarding you for careful positioning of your army. From humble conscripts to even the Baneblade, there are few units that don't benefit from this rule. It's not bad, really, not bad at all. Best units, Leman Russ Punisher. I quite like the Punisher in 8th edition, I must admit. That Punisher can really dishes out some damage. So here's another stratagem, Defensive Gunners. Use this stratagem when a charge is declared against one of your Astra Militarum vehicle units. When that unit fires Overwatch this phase, they successfully hit on a roll of a 5 or a 6 instead of a 6. That's really strong. Especially if you've got your tanks, so obviously they've got your big weapons on. To be able to hit on a 5 and a 6 instead of just 6s is huge. That's a 33.3% chance that you're going to hit. So, for instance, your silencer with its 20 shots, hitting on 5s and 6s, average of the dice, you're going to get quite a few hits. That's pretty tasty. So you can see where they're going with this. Obviously, units synergizing in the stratagems, etc. So far, Guard are looking quite quirky. Obviously, the different regiments, won't benefit from the other regiments' stuff, but not bad at all. And that just says it's an Astra Militarum stratagem. That doesn't say that it is just for Mordian. So that's the key thing. The doctrines are for the regiments themselves. These stratagems, unless they say specifically, I imagine they're for all. We'll see when the codex drops itself. There's a few other bits here, but I mean, if you want to go and have a look at this sort of stuff, you can check it out on Wargaming Community. I'm sure most of you use it already. We're just having a really quick look through at the minute for you. Destroyer, their doctrine. Units of this doctrine can add 6 inches to the maximum range of heavy or rapid fire weapons they fire, which would normally have a range of 24 inches or more. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Las guns becoming 30-inch weapons. I like that very much. So that's, yeah, that's not bad. So obviously that becomes a 30-inch weapon, which then means rapid firing within 15 inches instead of 12 inches. 3 inches on the battlefield is nothing to sniff at, definitely. Best units, heavy weapons squads. They're already handy in an Astra Militarum army. Throw in heirloom weapons, they'll be even better. Few enemies are going to be able to escape a 54-inch las cannon. While if you get charged, the destroy in order repel the enemy is potentially punishing. And then it goes on to say, until the end of the phase, the ordered unit can fire any of its weapons while it is within 1 inch of the enemy, regardless of weapon type. If they do so, they must target enemy units within 1 inch, even if friendly units are within 1 inch of these units. Bits and pieces. Here's another stratagem. It's called Go Recon. Use this stratagem at the start of your shooting phase. Select a unit of scout sentinels from your army. This unit can immediately move 2d6 but cannot shoot or charge this turn. Not awful. I mean, in my mind's eye, scouts, and I know Ryan slightly disagrees on this point, but in my opinion, scouts are a really good, cheap, run them cheap, and use them as bubble wrapping against deep strikers. So obviously you get your scout move, and if you have a few of these sentinels, really cheap, basic points cost, cheapest weapon you can throw on, I think it's a flamer, and then just bubble wrap them round. That pushes any potential alpha deep strikes back further, which is great, protects your units, nothing wrong with that at all. And that just gives you a little bit more flexibility with where you can push them to. So actually, if you had, for instance, 6 scout sentinels on the board, cheaply point costed, so far until the codex comes out at least anyway, that's not a bad stratagem at all, and for 1 CP. So the last one, Valhalla. The Valhalla Ice Warriors are ruthless, even by the standards of the Astra Militarum, and renowned for their willingness to expend the lives of their troops to secure victory for the Emperor. Pretty much sums up Guard, really, doesn't it? Spending lives. You get your little dustpan and your brush and just dust up the Guard, because that's pretty much how they die in droves with the troops anyway. So the regimental doctrine, infantry units with this doctrine, half the number of models that flee, rounding up, if they fail a morale test. Vehicles with this doctrine that have a damage table double the number of wounds they have remaining for the purposes of determining what their characteristics are. So grim demeanour helps make up for the generally poor morale possessed by the Astra Militarum units. After all, the last thing you need on the battlefield is for a few casualties on a unit of veterans to cause your key special weapons to flee. Similarly, vehicles in the Valhallan army have a much longer effective lifespan than others, meaning an opponent will be forced to fully destroy them rather than just relying on crippling you. Fair point. Not too bad at all. And then stratagem, but this does say, keyword, Valhallan stratagem. So this is only a stratagem that can be used by Valhallans. Use this stratagem at the end of your movement phase. Select a Valhallan infantry unit from your army, excluding characters and infantry squads that have used the combined squad stratagem that was destroyed early in the battle. Set up this unit wholly within your deployment zone within 6 inches of the edge of the battlefield and more than 9 inches from any enemy models. Then it goes on a bit about the Storm Lord. I think we all know how good the Storm Lord is in this edition, absolutely. And then Crush Them. Another stratagem, this is keyword Astra Militarum. Doesn't have any regimental keywords, so this is a free-for-all. Use this stratagem at the start of your charge phase. Select an Astra Militarum vehicle unit from your army. This unit can charge even if it advanced this turn. In the following fight phase, attacks move this unit hit on a 2+. Wow, great. For 1 CP, fantastic. So it can charge even if it advanced, and its attacks hit on a 2+. Wow, can't go wrong for that for 1 CP, not at all. So that's just a quick overview of what they've released so far that we know about the codex. So like I said, we're going to get the pre-orders tomorrow, and then next week will be the release of the codex. So as far as our scheduling goes, we've planned in for next Sunday, that's a week on Sunday, a day of recording. So we're going to do, we're pre-ordering the Astra Militarum codex. So we're going to do a full codex review, breaking down the differences between the codex and the current index. I'm sure there'll be some points increases. I doubt there'll be any points decreases because they already decreased a lot of the guard points. There'll be a bit of balancing here or hereabouts, I think. Not facts, but personal opinion. We already know that the conscripts are getting played with a little bit, which he does mention in one of the articles there, dropping them to 20 to 30 man squads instead of like the 50 blobs that people have been running. Another change there is that so far orders pass automatically, whereas with the conscripts, orders to the conscripts will only pass on 4+. Now I don't know whether they're going to bring that in for orders across the armies. I very much hope not, because I quite like it how it is now, but we'll see how that goes. So we're going to film a couple of battle reports, we're going to do some codex reviews, etc. The reason you've not had a video out this week so far is that I've just gone and spent a couple of £100 to be honest on an Imperial Guard. I call them Imperial Guard. That is what they are, but Astra Militarum. I've just gone and spent a couple of £100 on an army, so I'm currently painting it like mad. Battle tanks coming out my ears, Valkyries over there, which the wife's helping to touch up because I've done camo work on all of them. You'll see it all in the video that we'll be putting out next weekend, but that's taken up a lot of time. I'm not a painter, Ryan's the painter. But he's also ordered a ton of Imperial Guard stuff. He doesn't want to do an Imperial Guard army, but he calls it the Ultramar Auxiliary Regiment or Ultramar Auxiliary Force. He'll correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure. But he uses the Imperial Guard in his ultramarine colour scheme and whatever. Whereas I love Cadians. I've just gone for nice, simple Castellan green, Xandri dust, Cadian colour scheme, camo, etc. So hopefully I'll do that justice. I am trying my best to paint these nicely. Like I said, not a great painter at all. The table behind us, or behind me because Ryan's not here at the minute, has been finished off today. We got a load more of the ballast, did round the edges, tidied it up, then went and varnished clear coat lacquer, army paint lacquer over the top. We've got some dry brushing to do on the top, but effectively that's really simple and easy, so that is nigh on done. I'll get on with that over the next couple of days. Terrain can all go back on it, and then you can see the board finished as we intended it to be. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, guys. Bit of a ramble, but I just felt it was needed to let you know where we're going in the next week or two with the video content, obviously without anything being put up in the last week. We are busy working on stuff, so there'll be some really nice stuff coming out that I think you'll appreciate, or I hope you will anyway. And thanks a lot. Cheers for watching. Happy gaming.